Baba wa, Baba mi, Eshu. Wa Eshu, wa Eshu.
Anu Nation is home to the Anu spiritual order founded by Chief Jegna Haru Yuya Asan Anu. Some of the components of Anu Nation are Anu Life Global Ministries, Enlightenment and Transformation, Sadulu House, and Osiris Life Spiritual Services. SaduluHouse.com is the school component of Anu Nation, where spiritual empowerment through education and training is emphasized. One way that is accomplished is through our monthly webinars. Our webinars are packed with foundational information, rituals, and live instruction to empower your spiritual work. At SaduluHouse.com, you can view our diverse list of topics for this year that range from meditation to sex magic. And you can also register for any of the webinars at your convenience, sign up for our introductory Orisha class, schedule a spiritual reading, and sign up for the Anu Spiritual Training course. Enlightenment and Transformation is the media component of Anu Nation. Here, you can view all of our archived shows from over the years to our current segments. They include Chief Speaks, Masterminds Monday, Anu Asafo, Thunderground Thursdays, and Foundational Fridays. You can also visit us on our YouTube channels. They are Enlightenment and Transformation, Orisha Yoruba, and Anu Nation. Osiris Life Spiritual Services is for those who are ready to take the necessary actions to bring your life into holistic balance. Here we offer consistent monthly one-on-one coaching, solutions that are tailored just for you, practical hands-on self-development techniques that will accompany your monthly readings, and customized practical strategies designed for you that guarantee positive results. Simply choose the package that best fits your needs. And last but not least, AlphaOmegaStore.com. The Alpha Omega Store is our online botanica where we offer divination tools, herbs and incense, DVDs, books, and other hard-to-find ritual items. You can also get our best-selling foundational book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power. Other great works from Anu Nation are Shrine and Altar, Solutions for Dysfunctional Family Relationships, and Natural Hair for Young Women. All great books to assist you on your journey. To find out more on how to get involved with Anu Nation, visit our websites and YouTube channels and be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter.
Peace. Peace, 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 peace. Ikasan, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, and welcome all of you. I see we have, chat room camaraderie and niceties have already begun, the festivities. And I see we have some people here on Blog Talk Radio as well as some listeners we already have over here on, what's this thing called? YouTube. We have some listeners on YouTube. I forgot the name of it. Peace, everyone. Peace, Sister Allison and Sister Nicole and Brother Anwar, Brother Byron, and all the rest of you who, I had to scroll up to see. I'll come back and do my greetings a little bit later. But I just want to welcome all of you first-time listeners and all of you traditional and consistent listeners. This segment, my name is Chief Yuya. This segment is a community segment. And in this piece, we're going to be speaking about pretty much moving and operating and working around what we would call predatorial energies. Yeah, the title of this segment is how to move in a room of vultures so that you always come out on top. And what we're going to be speaking about is a few things, but specifically, I wanted to first clarify the idea and the concept of what we're talking about by saying that we're not particularly speaking about the Iyami or the Ajay in this segment, okay? So I know a lot of times when people see that birds or vultures and they're coming from that Orisha or Ifa perspective, they immediately think we're going to be speaking about witches. So we're not necessarily going to be speaking about that per se, but we might be speaking about a little bit of that per se. All right, let me give you all the call-in number. And also, those of you who are listening from Blog Talk, if my voice gets a little janky, a little funny, if I start doing that real high static thing and stuff, just hit the number 1 and let me know. I'm trying something a little different on that side the show. I'm always tweaking, so I'm trying something different in terms of the digital setup to see if we'll have a smoother experience, but I can't monitor on Blog Talk and speak at the side. I can't hear and talk at the same time. So if anything gets funny, just give me a heads up, so I'll know. And of course that goes without saying on the YouTube side as well. All right. But yeah, how to move in a room full of vultures, it's an important concept and important thing that I wanted to speak about and bring up. And not just because, we live clearly in a predatorial society, which, I have stated often. So many of you probably know that is a part of my philosophy, in terms of that recognition or the acknowledgement kind of society that we live in, but also because a lot of times some tend to make enemies where enemies don't exist. They tend to create wars where there are no wars, or battles where there are no battles. And oftentimes where there truly are wars and there truly are enemies, it pretty much goes unnoticed. And I have seen that very often within spiritual communities. A lot of times people, because again, there's still a genetic scarring from the Spanish Inquisitions. People still feel that, they start to get into alternative thought or in alternative spiritual investments, that this particular society is going to, wage an all-out war on them. Sometimes people don't understand what's important and what's not important, or what is destructive to Western culture and what's not destructive to Western culture. So they just, kind of take on this overall paranoia. Everyone's against me. My family's against me. My coworkers are against me. My friends are against me. And sometimes it just hovers there. It doesn't move. It stays in that space. And of course, that's not healthy. That's not healthy on many levels. And I'm not saying that I'm oblivious to the fact that, or even the truth that we're in a space where our spirituality or our culture in particular, if it's diametrically opposed to the strengths that be, that there may be certain aggressive pursuits to stomp it out. If we're actually living out that culture, if we're preaching a culture, nobody cares? That's not really doing too much. But if you're living it out, certainly you may have experiences that come into your life that will be unpleasant. And, I am a personal witness to that. But in this segment, we're speaking about something slightly different than that. And I'm in on board. Oh, thanks, Anwar. Anwar always got my back when it comes to that audio, boy. I appreciate you, brother. Thanks a lot. So, and I still have to talk to you, by the way. I didn't forget from yesterday, but yesterday was hectic. I worked all the way up into pretty much the sun came up from yesterday, so I didn't get a moment to reach out to you. But in any event, a lot of times, sometimes we miss the idea of, or the possibility of how citizens, in effect, move within a society that's created and founded upon being slick. You see, and I've spoken about this many times in different segments, wherein that we live within a society where we're praised for our ability to say one thing and do another thing. We get praised for that. In fact, we get really good salaries for that. If you go into government, if you go into politics, you can earn a pretty good living off of saying one thing and doing another thing. So a lot of times, again, we don't understand sometimes that a people will take on the spirit of their leadership. So if your leadership, even if it's not direct and conscious in your mind, if you say, well, you know what, I don't feel like I necessarily come under this system and this and that and that. But if you listen to some of the past segments that I've done, I've been kind of revealing to you how sometimes you still do, even though you think you don't. Sometimes those overlords are still very much present, and you're thinking in a way that you're behaving, and you may think that you've arrived. I've broken free. I'm completely liberated from those binds, and I'm good to go. And again, sometimes there may be a subversive paradigm that's still at play within the bowels of your own psyche. And if that subversive paradigm is still present, then those who represent the leadership or the agents of the emissaries of those of that paradigm, you'll take on their spirit. You see, even sometimes in our colloquialisms, we use words like "I'm politicking this, I'm politicking that," and politicking is an actual word, because to politic is a verb itself, to politic. So you have politics and you can politic, but essentially a lot of times, because we dismiss the possibility or the predominance of politicking in our world and in our society, sometimes we get wrapped up into situations that we did not think we signed up for. And you see that a lot, even in the spiritual communities. As I've said recently, politics permeates every thread of this society. So you should learn them. That's one of the things that I speak about a lot. Yeah, learn politics. And I guess when I say that, people think I'm saying, watch CNN, or different news channels and things like that. And I'm not particularly saying that. To learn politics, essentially, is to learn psychology, the art of deception, to learn etiquette, to learn protocol. That has way more to do with politics than the buildings in Washington, D.C., or wherever, or Parliament, or wherever your capital, municipal buildings are. Way more. If you learn protocol, etiquette, and the expression and the pushing of subversive agenda, you would get so much. So we're speaking about how to move inside of a room full of vultures and still come out on top. So essentially, how to move inside of a room full of politicians. You see, because that's essentially what we're speaking about. Essentially, how to move among people who may have a subversive agenda and may also even represent an enemy faction and still come out on top. Now, again, as I started the segment off speaking about really identifying what the enemy is or who the enemy is. That's such an important piece, because you have some people, especially within the conscious collectives, and there's different reasons for this, but who feel that everyone is the enemy. I got enemies to the left of me, enemies to the right of me. Everyone is my enemy. You know what? Before I go on, let me get a phone number. I forgot already. Call in number. If anybody wants to call in and listen via telephone, it's 515-605-9862. I'll say it again slower. 515-605-9862. And if you want to speak, just hit the number 1. And let me just give you a little heads up on that little hitting the number 1 thing. If I'm in the middle of a thought, I'll get to you after the thought. All right. Sometimes I see, like, when I'll say, oh, hit the number 1 if you want to speak, like a bunch of hands will go up. And then if I don't get to them in about 3 minutes, they go back down. So just know that if you hit the number 1, there's a switchboard on my end where I can actually see who has their hands up and want to speak. So, as many of you know who have listened to these segments, sometimes I've gone 40, 45 minutes, an hour over just to try to answer all of the hands that are up. So you will be addressed if you put your hand up, but it may not be immediately. All right. So just as a little heads up on that one. But, again, so good. We got that out the way. We got the phone number thing out the way. So, again, the idea of moving amongst vultures and moving amongst enemies first requires us to identify who and what the enemy is. Now, sometimes we confuse what one would call an enemy with just someone who bothers us, someone who we find irritating or we may find annoying. Sometimes we slip them into the pocket and the identifier of an actual enemy, which obviously would be incorrect. Right? Essentially, an enemy is anyone or anything who has an aspiration or an ambition that could place you in harm's way. That's it. And sometimes they know that their decisions or their choices are placing you in harm's way, or they don't know that the decisions, or they don't care. Actually, let me say it that way. Sometimes they know, they don't know, or they don't care that their choices could be causing you harm. Okay, so that's what an enemy is. An enemy is one who has aspirations or objections that could bring harm to you, that could place you in harm's way. That's an enemy. Not someone who laughs loud at work, who, smokes cigarettes in front of you, and because you have a personal thing about, secondhand smoke or whatnot, they're not particularly your enemy, because, and I have to make that distinction. I know it may sound a bit petty, me speaking about it, but I talk to so many different clients and stuff, and a lot of times they want spiritual work done against people who are not intentionally or maliciously bringing harm their way, but because maybe that person doesn't know how to deal with that type of energy, doesn't know how to navigate it. So because they don't know how to navigate it, they don't know how to work with it or to get around it, or essentially how to politic. Now they take a very hostile approach, which essentially turns them into the enemy. But if you're living in a world where everyone that's around you seems to be an enemy, in all honesty, either you're in a very toxic place in your life right now, or you need some form of emotional or mental therapy. Honestly. And I say that again, I'm not trying to be funny, anything like that, but there's a lot of people that I work with in this work that I do, who are coming for readings and coming for rituals, and it really turns into a therapy session because that's really more what they need. They begin to perceive everyone around them as the enemy, and no, that's nowhere near realistic. Okay, so so that's one thing to take a look at. So now we have an understanding, at least, of what an enemy is, right? Someone whose objectives or whose ambitions or aspirations could put you into harm's way. All right, that's your enemy. Now, if you go down your list now, which I advise you to do, of individuals who you may have looked at and said, "Me, this is my enemy. This is not my enemy." Maybe you can use just that very simple thing to fine tune it, to fine tune, who your enemies are, who your enemies are not. For instance, someone may tell you to eat something that's not good for you, and it's not good for you. So you say, "Listen, I don't eat like that. That's not the type of food that I consume or whatever." And they say, "Come on, there's nothing wrong with it." And they keep pressing it out of ignorance. Well, they're pressing it out of ignorance, not necessarily indifference. It's not that they don't care. Maybe if you explain to them, and fully explain, and they were in a place where they were listening, and they would understand, "Oh, okay, I see why you don't mess with it." It's just like if somebody says, "Hey, come on and eat some of this chicken," and you say, "Well, no, I don't eat meat," and they say, "Oh, you one of them," right? But let's say if you said, "Well, no, actually, I'm allergic to meat. If I eat it, I swell up really bad and I'll get sick and die." And they say, "Okay, well, I understand that." So now that's just a level of understanding, right? Now that may not be the truth. You may be lying, and learning how to move amongst vultures honestly requires some lying. So let me just say that, because let's just start this off with this so we can get this clear. This is another one of them. I know I'm gonna get some thumbs down videos. This is another one of those, because when you start speaking about moving amongst those who may have objectives and intentions that are against you, most people will say things like, "Well, I just don't have the energy for that. I don't have time for all of that, for acting like that or being like that." Okay, that's fine if you don't. That's absolutely fine, But this is for people who do recognize that to move through the world, they may have to take on certain characteristics and take on certain character traits, because it's really learning to move through psychology. So, like even learning a person's psychology or general psychology will allow you to frame things in a way that will be most effective. Now, you may be a person that says, "Well, why do I have to frame things anyway? Why can't I just say what I feel like saying?" Well, you absolutely can just say what you feel like saying. That's also your option too. There are many ways to move through the world, and certainly, I don't think I've ever really. I don't think I have. I have to go back and check, but I don't think I've ever presented anything as being, absolute. If you don't do it this way, your life is over. Okay, so I just kind of want to make that very clear in terms of what we're speaking about here. We're speaking about a way to move among certain types of people. And truth be told, if you're not doing certain things in life, you might not be surrounded by vultures. If you're not, let's say, in a corporate arena, or if you're not trying to build a business, or if you're not trying to extend beyond your current comfort zone, and maybe your comfort zone may be to be around enemies. But if you're not currently extending beyond or aspiring towards anything, chances are you're probably not going to get into anyone's way. Okay, chances are you may not have to be put inside of an environment where there's a lot of wolves, or where there's a lot of sharks, or where there's a lot of vultures, because these are the people who, through their predatorial senses, strive and move ahead based on their own investment and self-interest. So if you're not that type of person, then you might not even encounter too many of these on your degree of docility that you currently have inside of you. So I just want to make that clear. Like I said, I know what kind of segment this is, and I typically know the responses a lot of times, but I have to tell you that even if you may not realize it or not, just in your normal everyday workings and movings and trying to get things done and trying to make a life for yourself in this world, most people encounter some form of adversary or enemy. And truth be told, even before we get outside of our own body matrix or our own innerverse, there's already some degree of enemy present. which obviously goes into a different kind of conversation. But there is an enemy within. There is an enemy within. But let's get into it, a little bit more for a second. And the first thing I want to say is this, because again, I'm basing a lot of this on, not basing what I know on what I've experienced, but I'm basing some of what I'm telling you all based on what I have experienced. Sometimes in the work that I do, there are certain kind of questions or certain type of aspirations or statements that come up, consistently. And as a result, I make kind of a mental note, if I'm doing work, especially if it's seasonal, and I say, man, this year everybody's coming to me with this issue or with that issue, then I'll speak to that. I won't just put it in a vacuum. Okay. So one of the first things that I see that jams a lot of people up when it comes to going into an environment where they're surrounded by people who are rough and rugged, who are vultures, who are looking to eat them up, and keep in mind that, vultures are typically scavengers. So they're going to eat up something that doesn't have livity to it, that doesn't have vivaciousness to it. So just the whole idea of going into an environment humdrum, which with eyes wide shut, you're going to put yourself in harm's way. So there's a saying that we use often, being as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove, and I'll get into that a little bit. So when you go into an environment, you have to be aware, you have to be looking around, you have to kind of be peeping who's who, which is another form of protection. I'll get into that. But one of the biggest things that I notice with a lot of people is that they speak too much. When they have a problem, or they sense that they're surrounded by adversaries, or they sense that they're surrounded by enemies, their immediate reaction is to become vocally confrontative. So either they go mute and they try to take a very passive, docile role, or they seek to confront with words, which is the very worst thing you could do. That's the absolute wrong thing to do. It never works. And a lot of times I try to warn clients before they do. I'm just going to say something. Don't do that. That's not the way you do it. There's a way to do this. And, I can't hold it in. Okay. So because you don't have any emotional control now you're going to create more problems. A lot of times, and especially, let's say in particular on the workplace, because I know this is where, because a lot of people, especially nowadays, they're not really a part of communities as much as they used to be, or we used to be as a people. So a lot of times the majority of our social interaction comes, through our work environments. That's and where our most problems come from, through our work environments. That's where we meet our mates sometimes. That's where we meet our best friends, where we get into our most trouble. Sometimes it's on the job, So for a lot of people, this may be relevant to the environments that they work in, right? That's where they may be encountering the most of us. And I'll tell you, so where does it usually happen, or how does it usually happen in those environments, right? And I mean, I've seen it in different things. I've seen it in ministries, I've seen it in community rearing organizations. I've seen this in villages, a lot in the villages, that's a whole nother topic, village politics. Pretty much seen it all. I mean, within families, of course, even sometimes among children, you have this. And where does it usually begin? Where does it usually start? Well, it usually starts with deception, right? Usually a child or a person, let me just not say a child, but a person will tell a lie on another person, right? That's where it usually begins. Even within, when you go into a room full of vultures, they're sizing you up and they're praising you, and there might be an alpha in the room, and people might be vying for the attention or the favorite position, or the favorite to be the apple of the eye of the alpha. So they may say something about you or someone else that's untrue. And a lot of times the initial response is to use your own words. You've said words to damage me, so now I'm going to say words to damage you, or I'm going to say words to defend myself, or I'm going to say words to put you in your place without realizing that that's completely and totally non-effective for a vulture. I'll give you a very easy example that some of you may have experienced. Yesterday, I was talking to someone, and they asked me just about like something like, kind of like what I don't want to say like what I'm into, but what I do. They say, long story, but I said, well, because they were asking me about some holidays, and I was like, well, be honest with you, I never really know when those holidays come around unless somebody says something. I said, I'm not really too in tune to them, because I don't really celebrate them based on my own cultural investment. I'm not really too invested in some of these national holidays and stuff like that because of where, my investment and my principles lie. And the person didn't say, well, and they were trying to kind of make a point in front of other people, and they said, well, I don't really understand that because you mean to tell me if your family celebrates one thing that you're going to say that you're not going to do it simply because you don't celebrate it? That's it. Just because you don't celebrate it, you're not going to spend time, because it's not about the day. It's about, the opportunity to get together with your family. It's not so much about the function and and I'm listening, and I said, well, I hear what you're saying. I said, but do you really think that that's an answer? That's a question that I can answer? Because just by the very inflection and the word choice, it's very clear that it's not a pure question. You use simply, because I simply don't celebrate it. But I said, I never said that I just simply don't celebrate something. So to minimize it by giving it the prelude, the precursor of the word simply, means that, you've already downgraded the value and the strength and the emphasis that I've put on my own investment in my own culture. And I said it's a personal thing. I never spoke about what my family does or doesn't do, And then when I said that, person said, oh, you one of those people, you overthink, you think too much. And I said, okay. So they wanted to engage, right? And I said, well, there's really very little point in engaging because I pretty much see where you're at this point. It's not like you're trying to learn. I've already taught you what I do. So at this point, you're just challenging it. And we're ready for different things at different times. And right now, yeah, I could teach you back and forth. Now, this person doesn't know what I do. They don't know me as chief anything, right? Neither did this group of people. Because, I don't go around introducing myself like that. So I said, well, I could teach you about this, but I think that would probably be a waste of my energy. So it would be better for me just to continue to live it, and then you can learn about it just by watching me, right? So, that went to where it went, but it quelled everything and brought everything down, to level grounding, because I wasn't going to buy a ticket to the carnival ride. And that's a carnival. Everybody's sitting there. All the vultures in the room are sitting there, and they're waiting for a nice juicy meal, waiting for me to get cut up and bloody and to get upset and have my buttons pushed and all of that so they can come feed. So what I decided to do is I'm not going to buy a ticket to the fair or to the carnival. No, I don't want a ticket. Y'all go ride. Now, so this is an example of what I'm speaking about. A lot of times we use words to engage back and forth, and we don't understand that engagement, it creates more problems as opposed to proving through action. If you say, okay, you know what, this person has lied on me, but I'm going to use my actual actions to disprove them. See, so now, because like I often tell you, what we see reaches us. If you understand the speed of sound and the speed of light, what we see reaches us sooner than what we hear. You see, so evidence by your work and evidence by the things that you do, you can disprove the vultures, or you can disprove a room full of enemies, or disprove a naysayer. You see, but a lot of times, unfortunately, we completely skip over the opportunity and the possibility that we can actually disprove a person by showing that the lies or whatever is being said about us is unfounded, just by our performance or just by our activity. Okay. So that was one thing, right? That came up. One thing I was thinking about in terms of sometimes what we do to, I guess I could say shoot ourselves in the foot, right? A term that we use a lot. But sometimes what we don't also understand is that if we don't engage in something, especially something that doesn't have the embodiment of soul, because it's not coming from truth, it's not coming from an actualized place, that it has to be fed. And if we don't feed them, like we say, don't feed into that. Well, what does that really mean? Don't give your creator or divine attention to it, because that's how things become animated, especially when you speak and give it the breath of life. Don't even give it the breath of life. Don't engage it. You see, when you engage it, you as a divine being, you invigorate it, you animate it. But again, if you just use your actions, to because sometimes people are using their lies, and especially, again, we're speaking about, and I want to make it very clear, we're specifically speaking about what people do in a room full of vultures. We ain't talking about if you in a room full of thugs. If you're in a room full of missionaries, that's a complete, I mean, not missionary, well, heck, what's the difference, right? If you're in a room full of mercenaries, that's a completely different vibe and defense tactic that you have to take on. When you're moving in a room full of vultures, you have to learn how to do things with polish. Now, how do we know the idea, the concept calls forth the cognition of polish? Because of what I said earlier about politicians, right? I spoke to you all about that, and us living in a country where, of course, politics, they're the ruling faction, and we praise them. Even when people talk about Obama, he carried himself with dignity, carried himself with class. People speak about Trump. He's a caveman. Look at him, and blah, 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 blah. He tells the truth. He tells exactly what he means. Oh my God, we hate him. Whereas you got this smiling hyena over here who all of y'all are praising because he looks good in the suit, but you're not looking at the actual policies that he's implementing. A lot of the policies that you're upset with Trump about, he was the one who did them. But he looks smooth doing it. Well, that's the essence of politics. You see, when you look at even the word polite, right? And coming from the Latin politus, right? So politus means to shine. Literally, it means to shine something up or to polish something up. And then we take that as an idea of meaning refinement, or meaning to kind of accomplish something that's cultured, but essentially by exact word, it's to shine something, to make it bright, and in particular to polish it. That's polite, polish. They come from the same place, right? So once you get that understanding, and then you say, okay, it comes from politis, well, you also have the word politics, right? And one of the earlier forms of politics, one of the earlier forms was polites. Polites was actually a term that we used before the word citizen, okay, which is not really that great of a term, but if you kind of understand the science, the paradigm that you're invoking, it gets very interesting. But polites were citizens, okay, because citizens were considered to be people who were polished and who were refined. Now, the whole idea of being polished and refined, coming from polite, from politic, from polites, it all connected together. And of course, just polis by itself means city or means civilization, the word polis. So that's why sometimes you see polis or alis after different words, and they'll say, okay, this was a city here, or this was a town here. When you see that that suffix polis, it means a city, but essentially it's a place where the refined, polished people are. Okay, so essentially what they're speaking about in that idea is that this is an individual, a polite person or a political person, is an individual who's able to move and push their agenda with elegance and grace. Essentially, there's no there's no there's no inference to nobility. You see, there's no inference to empathy. There's no inference to righteousness. None of that's there in those understandings and the paradigms that's invoked by using that terminology. There's no inference to any of that. Okay, just so you can be clear, it's strictly talking about someone who's smooth, literally, by its own, polished, smooth. That's what it's talking about. Someone who has that level of refinement. We call that game. We call that being slick. We call that being smooth. But it's all the same thing. Okay, so a lot of times, people will use politeness as a mask for their insincerity. Okay, and that's one of the ways that vultures operate, and absolutely, that's one of the ways that I just saw. I'm sorry, my eyes flashed to the chat room just real quick while I was talking all this time. My eyes closed. I opened them, and I see Vijo said, "Thinking too much is supposed to be an insult." SMH, LOL. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what, once that was said, and I'm gonna tell you something really, really funny, which made me even laugh even more. I was told that twice yesterday. One said, "I overthink," and the other one said, "Oh, you're thinking too much into it." So, of course, I have my own personal opinion. We'll say I have my own personal opinion about that kind of statement or that kind of thinking. And when I say my own personal opinion, I have my own personal opinion about people who make statements like that. Of course, you could imagine it's not the first time I've heard it. Somebody say, "Oh, you overthink. You think too much." But it was just funny to me. I heard it twice yesterday. Two different people. You overthink, and then the other one said you think too much. Okay, sometimes when you hear things like that, it gives you an opportunity to really look at your circle or look at the people who you're choosing to engage and interact with, and just kind of make a decision as to, well, what the heck am I doing? Like maybe these are not the people who, I should be talking to. Maybe I'm not getting the best type of interaction here, talking to these type of people, these types of people, we could say. So, okay, so now that we understand that the idea of being polite within itself, and I know, again, this is kind of like with yesterday, and the person who said I overthink, I'm gonna tell you what happened, and then when I tell you a little bit about what happened, then you'll probably understand why a lot of times when I speak, I try to give you the root definitions of things. The person said something to me, and it said something about earning respect, and I said, well, and I just, I got a way to say things. I have a way of saying things to drop a little pebble to see where it goes. If it doesn't, then I'll just walk away from it. And I said, well, I don't really think you can earn respect, just like you can't earn love. And the person's like, of course you can. What you talk? Like, nah, I'm the dummy. So I said, okay, cool, no problem. I said, to help me out though, because maybe I'm a little confused. I said, can you tell me what the word respect means? Because maybe I don't even know what the doggone word means. And the person was like, they paused for a long time. And I was like, well, do you know the definition? I said, and they were like, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe the book definition. I know what it means to me. And I said, oh, okay, so like you're speaking your own language. Because I thought, if we're speaking English, I thought then we should probably have at least, we're pretty much using words. We're using both English together so that we both can understand when each other is talking. Because I'm just like, if you would make a statement, you're saying something, and I'm kind of, you're disagreeing with what I'm saying, but you're using words to disagree with me, but you're saying you don't know what the words mean. So I said, I don't know. It just seems a little bit more confusing. And that's when I was told that I overthink. So I said, okay. Sometimes you got to just say, okay, okay. There's great power in silence. You don't, some things you can keep inside. You don't always have to respond to everything. Sometimes you got to learn how to be quiet. It's called, a lot of times, being tactful. Tacit silence. People use it in courtrooms all the time. They use tacit silence. Certain things would be said, and instead of saying a rebuttal, instead of saying yes or no, they don't say anything, because once you say yes or no, you engage in the argument. It's like a cop comes up to you and says, "Hey, man, you were doing this and that and that." No, I wasn't. Then what are they going to say next? All right, well, let me give you the ticket, and then we'll let the judge decide, because now we're arguing, and we don't need to argue out here in the street. You just take this ticket, and then we'll go to the courtroom where the judge, who also, we work on the same team, by the way, will give an impartial decision, because you've decided to engage me in an argument by even responding to me. So sometimes you have to learn to use tacit silence. I remember one time Richard Pryor talked about doing that one day. He said it worked. Richard Pryor said one time he got pulled over, and he was so high on cocaine that when the cop pulled him over and was asking him all these questions, he couldn't say anything. So all he did was roll down his window, and he just kept smiling at him. He said that's all he could, buster the strength to do, because he was so high. He didn't answer one question, just smiled. And the cop just let him go, high off of cocaine. Tacit silence. I'm not going to engage you in this. So I tell you, even in a sense of what I do, and a lot of times when people find themselves in those situations where, again, they're in a room full of vultures and don't know how to come out of the situation, not necessarily unscathed, but come out the situation victorious. I'm gonna tell you, a lot of times what happens that puts people in those situations, and this is very common in again, the conscious collectives. People are way too isolated. You hear me speak about it all the time, that we're like fragmented pieces. And when we're fragmented in the way that we are, it's very easy to pick us off, because we have no allies. So we have no one to shield us from our actual enemies. So one of the greatest things that you can do is get to know people. Like, say, for instance, whether, again, it could be your organization that you're in, it could be, your ministry, this just comes up. It comes up in so many different scenarios that it would be very difficult for me to speak about each way that it comes up, because a lot of clients come to me, and sometimes it's a family situation. Most of the time is a burial. That's when it comes up, or a family reunion. Or if there's some family land, usually something over property, which basically creates a corporation out of the family. I mean, you're dealing with business matters, but there's so many different ways that this energy comes up, or these scenarios come up, that it would be hard to even list them. But I tell you, one of the greatest things you do is get to know people who are part of that collective. Every single person who's a part of that collective. See, that's one of the ways that you learn to move around vultures. You create a shield of people around you. When you're isolated and you're fragmented and you have no allies, you make your job much, 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 much more harder. So, you have to almost make cultivating a relationship, or relationships, because essentially when you're cultivating relationships within a structure, within an organization, within a ministry, you're literally cultivating that particular ministry. Okay, because cultivation is what cultivation is turning over. It's like agriculture. It's planting seeds. So that certain things will grow later. So you want to make cultivation, period. Cultivation. Let's say contemplation. You want to make cultivation. That's the last time I'm gonna use the word, because obviously it doesn't want to come out of my mouth today. But you want to use that one more time. Cultivation, and you want to use that as a frequent and habitual habit, like every day. You want to do it so that it's almost like just second nature, that you're constantly planting seeds, and then you'll find over time and over several seasons that you'll be completely shielded from those who would choose to be your enemies. See, a lot of times, though, especially again, when we come into our consciousness, we think isolation is the way to go. That's why I don't mess with nobody. That's why I don't talk to nobody. That blah 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 blah. But then when something happens, now all of a sudden we want to try to gain all these allies, and it's too late. And one of the reasons is because usually by the time something happens, whatever it is that we're trying to gain assistance in, we're only speaking about from our personal perspective. See, that's the number one problem. Now, the reason I bring that up, as a segue, because when people come to me, that's what it usually is. You see, when you're in a situation like that, you're in a room full of vultures or an organization full of vultures or whatever your scenario is, you're within an environment full of vultures. One of the things that you want to do is seek out guidance from someone who you trust. Now, the problem is this: how sometimes I can tell immediately, and I'm sure some of you who even listen to these segments, you've probably listened at times, and this is how people reveal themselves. A lot of times they'll call, right? They're having a problem with their whole family, let's say. They'll call, let's say, yeah, I'm having a problem with my family. I don't know, is it me? Well, heck, we had one of those recently. Is it me or what? I don't know what it is, what's going on. And then you start giving them the guidance, and then they'll buck back on you, right? As soon as they do that, what do? I mean, for those of you who have ears to hear, I don't know if you notice it, they reveal right there in that moment that they're the problem. It's not the family member, it's not the job, it's not the supervisor, it's not the coworker, it's them. Because even a person who's outside and external to that situation, they won't even listen to them. They're not listening to anyone. They're so consumed by their feelings of injustice or their desire to maintain their self-interest, which is a sign of a predator. A completely self-centered or self-absorbed person is a predator. Okay? And I'll break that down another time. Actually, I was going to share some of that idea today, but another time, But a lot of times, tactfully, people don't know how to wait and pause, keep whatever's going on to themselves for a moment, and then seek out guidance from someone who they actually respect. Because bad mouthing or speaking ill of the person that they're having issue with is only going to cause problems. Okay, you got to remember what I said earlier. It's about your actions. It's not about what you can say to convince someone otherwise. Because, and I'm speaking also from a supervisor, manager's, leader's perspective. There's nothing worse when one person is performing a certain action or one person is lying on another person, and then the other person comes and complains about that other person. Now you're sick of both of them. Because 9 times out of 10 in a leadership capacity, you know who's who. So even though you may have one person lying on another person, you're also playing a strategy game as well. You may not immediately say, you know what, stop lying on so-and-so, because you never know what a person may, that person may be working on a big project. See, and that's what I said. This is one of those things people say, they're not going to like some aspects of this segment. But, that person may be working on a big project for you. And you might say, you know what, I know this person's a snake, but the king of the jungle has to learn how to deal with all the animals. So I'm not just going to say, okay, snake, you got to leave the jungle. Go live in a house somewhere because you don't play nice with others. It's not about that. You have to be able to see the bigger picture. And a lot of times people don't respect that or trust that and the people who they're going to for quote unquote advice. But when you go and you let people know what's going on, it does a couple things. Number one, it lets people who possibly care about you know that you're possibly in harm's way. Especially like, let's say if it's even a job situation and you go out and you seek advice from someone you care about or someone you trust and you respect, or it's a situation in the organization or a ministry or whatever, then now that person may start to you never know, they could make provisions for you that you don't even know about. Well, heck, I'm looking at this person's going to get fired. Let me pull some money out of my 401k, or let me put some money to the side, or clear out that guest room because I know that this person is about to encounter rough times. They're surrounded by, and I see that they're in harm's way. So let me make some provisions. But a lot of times, again, when sometimes we're the enemy and we don't want to admit it, right? Or sometimes when we're just so consumed in what we consider to be the injustice that's been waged against us, when we start to speak about it, we start to project almost in a way that we say everyone's the vulture, everyone's the enemy, and we don't recognize that, okay, maybe I'm in a space of confusion right now, and some of this that I'm saying doesn't add up. So one of the things you want to do is when you're going and you're seeking out assistance, don't seek out assistance in a way where you're sharing your impressions of what's going on, or you're sharing the hypothesis or the conclusions that you've come to with the person that you're seeking out attention. You don't want to create a sandwich, shall we say, of your actual story. Anytime I see somebody do that, and I mean, let me just say this. People who have called these segments, I'm going to say maybe like 98% of the people do that. 98%. That's why people have so much trouble getting on the phone with me. Because I see through the BS. It's a small 2% that will, if they're in a situation like that, that will actually ask for some guidance authentically. Most people are projecting their own impression, or they're projecting their own conclusion. And when you don't align with that conclusion or that projection, then now they'll give off the impression that they feel like they're under attack. Okay, that's a commonality, which is, again, the reason I'm bringing it up. So you have to learn how sometimes, even though you may feel something about a situation, you may feel that you know the conclusion of what's actually going on. You have to learn how to communicate with a certain degree of indirectness, especially if you're speaking to someone who may have the power and the ability to affect what's actually going on. Like, let's say, if, again, you're in a room full of vultures and you believe that something's happening to you, you don't say, they're doing this to me, they're doing that to me, they're doing that to me. What you do is you seek clarification. You might say, okay, there's something I'm a little confused about here. And then you lay out what's going on and you wait. You don't ask a statement, or you don't make a statement poised as a fictitious question. I'm confused about something here. I was told to do this, that, and I did that, and such still has a problem with me. And it's like, whatever I do, they always have something to say. Now, I'm confused. Nobody wants to hear that garbage. I'm telling you right now. And again, like I said, this may not be the most popular subject, what I'm speaking about right now, but nobody wants to hear that. And I'm speaking, when I say no one, if you're coming to me for guidance, if you're coming to me for advice, if you're coming to me and you're recognizing that there's some trust here, that you trust what I'm going to say to you, and you come to me like that, there's nothing really that I have to say. Because now it turns into a therapy session. We can't even deal with the actual situation. We can only deal with your lunacy. And it becomes a conversation about your lunacy. You see? So a lot of times we have to learn to present whatever it is that we want to say and we want to share without conclusion. Because if you already have the conclusion, why are you speaking to me? You see, and that's what anyone in that position is going to feel. That's what they're going to say in that sense. And again, that's a faux pas. That's a mistake that so many people make that you wouldn't imagine. But you got to understand that if you're looking for allies, if you're looking for assistance, whether it's from your peer or whether it's from a superior or even if it's from a subordinate, doesn't matter. Any positioning, up, down, in the middle, that you're seeking for support from, I'm going to tell you something that's very key and very critical. No one ever takes the word of someone who believes or gives off the impression that they're under attack. I'm telling you. Now I know that may not sound good. I'm telling you because I'm gonna show you something. When you explain something to someone or you share a story and you're using your own perspective, you're filtering it through the perspective of your victim's story, then you immediately give off the image and the impression to the person listening that you're evasive and you're paranoid. And that there's parts of whatever that went on that you're not sharing. That's why if you'll ask certain questions, you'll see that those questions serve as triggers. Now, for those of you, again, with ears to really hear, if you remember some of the segments that I've had on this segment, on this show, you notice that I mainly will ask questions before I will give guidance. Unless I'm rushing, we're coming to the end, and I'll be like, all right, listen, this is what it is. I got to get a phone. But usually I'll ask a question. And you'll find that when a person is disillusioned, when that person is the actual issue, when you ask a question, it'll set them off. The reason being is because they've packaged this story that they're bringing to you, right? Let's say if the story has 10 points, well, their package has 6. And obviously, these are the 6 that make them look like a victim. And if you say, well, wait a minute, hold on, back up. When you did this, what about that? And what about, and then they start to get irate. Now you already know as a listener. See, because when we talk about moving in a room full of vultures, sometimes the vulture may try to take advantage of you in this way too, where they pretend like they're being victimized. And you don't even understand that they're just gonna burn you out, and they're gonna hang you out to dry. They may be trying to get you to do dirty work that they can't do for themselves. You see, so they'll present it like that. It's a story with 10 points. They give you 6 points, so you recognize something's missing here. So you question about the other 4 points, or you ask a question that would lead to the unveiling of one of those other points. They flip out. And they flip out in an irrational manner to the point that all you can do is get quiet, which is what they wanted to begin with. So now you say, okay. Well, you know what? Let's move on from that point. Because obviously we're getting nowhere with that. And then if you're looking at them face to face, you can almost see a look of satisfaction on their face. Like, yeah, move on from that. You see? That's predatorial activity, believe it or not. Those who are constantly taking on that victimization role because they have a high degree of self-absorption. And like I said, self-absorption is the prelude and the gateway to the predatorial mind. Okay. Now I see some questions in the chat room. I'm going to get to those questions. Just give me a moment. We're going to take just a little Fiji water gulp break. And then I'm going to come back to your questions, all right? So if anyone has, I have more points I'm going to share on this to help you guys out, but I'm going to take just a moment if you want to collect your thoughts and put any questions forth. If you want, you can call 515-605-9862, hit the number 1. And if not, you can, this freaking thing. It's the chat, the YouTube chat. You could use, I don't know, for some reason I can't say YouTube today. I think I need some water. My throat is dry. So, or you could use the YouTube chat. Okay, so either one. All right. So we're gonna just take a break. I see there's some hands up already on the Blog Talk Radio side. Just stay there. I'll get right to you. We're gonna take one quick break, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna get into your questions and more of this information. All right. And like I said, anything you want to ask, whatever, just post it up or call in and hit the number 1.
Spoke that African truth. Came with that ma'at. Came with that medicine. This one's livicated to y'all. Spoken word meets pyramid intellect, spitting with Kuumbic genius and maximum respect. Modern day MC, you emerge from the jolly, aka griot. Stop delivering that rubbish. speak from the soul. Formula to brilliance is the no-mo. Using words, sound, and power with breath control. A lot of y'all rappers is on remote control. On the scrotum of music execs. Got you pimping, hustling, killing. Pure disrespect. Programmed to spew lyrical vomit. Stench of your creativity smell like hot shit. Your mental could use some root tonic. Got the community sick with powerful doses of self-hatred. Ambition transcends the material lust for the bling-bling. Message got our youth headed to Rikers and Sing Sing. Porn video images got boys living from their ding-a-ling. Looking at virgins with intent to penetrate the hymen. Girls define themselves by perverted fantasies of men. Walking the streets revealing the skin. Distracting our entire community from liberation. Respect due to the MC that operates with responsibility. Sacrificing material gain to honor our identity. Blast Master KRS-One, enough respect. Jungle Brothers, enough respect. Yeah. X-Clan, enough respect. PE, enough respect. Most Def, enough respect. Talib, Kweli, enough respect. Peace.
All right. So we're back. We're back with more community on enlightenment and transformation, and we're speaking about moving, or how to move, I should say, in a room full of vultures and still. Okay, Blog Talk is cool. Thank you, Brother Anwar. How to move? He must be sitting in the studio or something. You got all these able to monitor from so many different places. But how to move in a room full of vultures and still, come out on top. All right, I'm gonna take a call, then I'm gonna get into some more of this information. 718, you're on community.
Peace.
Peace, brother.
Thank you. Name is Jamar.
Hey, peace, Jamar.
First off, I just want to say thank you for the, the space and Honor Nation and all that. You guys are good.
Give thanks. Appreciate it.
As simply as possible. You guys are good.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Sure.
When you're trying to determine if a person is really an enemy or a vulture, what are some of the things that you look for?
Okay. Well, self-interest is one of the first things I look for. If they're more absorbed within their self than they actually are in anything, and I mean not even things that may seem altruistic, but anything external. So say for instance, you can almost see this in our society if you look at the media that people like to engage in, especially like if you look at some of the literary media, you have some people who are really into sports or really into entertainment or group activities or social discussions, things like that, just any kind of external form of engagement. And then you have those who will just, they gravitate to magazines like Self, Glamour, Image, Me, you see, which is geared towards one segment of the population. Sad to say, I have to say this, that those type of magazines are typically geared towards women. And that's how they create the wolf inside of women that doesn't need to be there, but that's how they get you. That's how they trick you. So yeah, I'll look at movements towards vanity first. That's one of the first things if I'm looking for a predator. Obviously, of course, because I'm a big advocate of physiognomy, I'll look at the person's physiognomy.
Right.
I look at how they look. That will tell you a lot, how aggressive they are, to determine if they're a vulture. Because again, you might have a vulture and you might have a shark, and it's two different things. The shark is going to come with bad intentions and make their bad intentions known. Okay, we can work with that. But the vulture is going to use more politics. So sometimes I'm even looking at their level of insincere or artificial refinement as well. The more polished that the individual strives to become, the more, because like sometimes you may have had this experience. You could be sitting talking to someone. It could be a job interview. I've had that experience at a job interview, and the person interviewing me, while they're talking to me, they're looking at themselves in the mirror, fixing their tie, cleaning something off their cufflink. They're not paying any attention to me. They're absorbed in their own vanity. I know that's a predator, because they're always going to put their ambitions and their objectives above anything else, and they're not going to care if they put me in harm's way. That's a predator. You see, so that's like the one of the main things that I look for, or I look at.
All right, so kind of like there's really no true connection, because I'm pretty sure you've experienced this. You're talking to someone, could be like you said, a job interview, it could just be a coworker or whatever, and there's like an actual give and take there. It's not just the superficial questions about yourself,
right,
or each other. It's kind of like, oh, we actually build them, we're actually vibing together, versus that fake smile, the fake looks. And like you said, I've never actually seen someone look in a mirror. Maybe I just missed it. But something like that is just very fake, very, very polished thing.
Right. That's a predator. That's a predator, because you now you're talking to a politician. Always look at, again, the insincere empathy that they'll give you. Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. You thirsty? Want something to drink? Come on, have a walk on back. It's very programmed.
Right.
In that sense, and you realize that they're just moving to the objective, and that's it. Now, again, you may have a shark. Shark is like a samurai. They're letting you know, like, listen, this is what I want. If you're in my way, I'm gonna cut through you. But they're gonna let you know, they're not gonna move silently. They're gonna let you know, I'm gonna cut through you. It's not like what a politician might do. Like, that's why people will look at Trump. He's not really a politician, because he's not polished. He's offending everybody.
Right,
he's a predator, but he's not an elusive predator. He's like a shark. No, I'm just gonna come. I'm gonna destroy everyone. I don't care who I hurt. It's a little different. So yeah, you're absolutely right, man. In that environment, the plasticness, and sometimes you can look at different experiences that we engage in that fuels and initiates that same artificialness, like on the internet. There's a movement towards presenting yourself as something other than what you are, or again, having these plastic or digital avatars that don't really express the fullness of what you are, expressing fake empathy through emoticons, things like that, Yeah. So it permeates so many other things. Beautiful. Give thanks,
I got
brother.
you. Thank you for that, Chief. I appreciate that one.
Absolutely. My pleasure, my brother. All right. Enjoy the rest of the call, all right? I'm just going to take the next one. All right. Peace. All right, cool. So 804, you're on. 804, you're on.
Peace, Chief. Peace.
Peace, brother. Peace.
I wanted to, I know earlier in the call you mentioned something about tacit silence.
Sure.
And one of the things that I've noticed, at least in my life, is that sometimes tacit silence can be confused with like a tacit approval. So
yeah,
I may have been in a situation where, because I didn't say anything, all of a sudden the person assumes that I agree.
That you agree
with
right.
what it is that they're doing or what it is that they said. And one of the things that I find that I think you do well is that you call things to the carpet right away. Like, okay, nah, I don't agree with that. Whereas sometimes, in order to be a politician or to appear polished, or to be diplomatic in some cases, you just don't say anything, even though you agree. You might even nod your head. Some people might even nod their head. They'll give the kind of thing,
right.
But they don't actually agree. So I was trying to figure out, and that's one of the things I've been working on in my mind for a while, actually, for the last few months, is how to be more assertive when it comes to my beliefs, and not give that tacit approval when folks are kind of telling you who they are.
Yeah. Well, you have to look at it like this. Is giving tacit approval damaging to you? Or the illusion of tacit
No,
approval.
not always. No.
All right, then leave it alone. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone. A lot of times I'll jump on certain things, like when we're on the air here, and I'll tell you honestly, it's because of the benefit of all of you listeners. I have a certain responsibility. So certain things at certain times I do have to jump in and say, wait a minute, that ain't right. But in my private life, no, I'm not so quick to do that. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of times I have a lot of allies. I'm protected a lot of times because I have so many different friends and stuff, from so many different walks of life, because I may not be as outwardly judgmental. Now, inwardly, of course, you're always going to judge things, inwardly. That's just, you drink some water or eat a piece of fruit, you're going to judge it, But a lot of times, again, we have to learn how to kind of move with a certain navigation, and you don't have to be untrue to yourself, but we certainly have to learn. I hear that zipper and everything coming up, brother. I'm going to mute you for a minute, then I'll bring you back. All right.
Oh, sure.
It sound like the brothers. It's all right, brother. No, it's okay. It sound like the brothers getting ready for work or something. But yeah, a lot of times, like the brother was speaking about, our silence. It seems like acquiescence, and sometimes you can use that. So that's why I said to him, no, don't immediately throw that out, because one of the key things that we have to do when we're moving in a room full of vultures is this. Don't let your adversaries know that you're on to them. See, that's one of the first things we do, which a lot of times neutralizes what we want to do, right? We want to start a new movement. We want to reclaim our identity, reclaim our heritage, reverse some of the things that this society has done to us, right? So what's the first thing we do? We go online, we set up a Facebook page or something, right? We go online and we put up our 10-point plan for everyone to read. Dumb. It's just dumb. So you're throwing it out there right away. You're letting your enemies know that you're on to them and how you plan on reversing everything that they're doing to you. You see? So a lot of times it's our silence that can be our greatest weapon. And again, I know that this is not, I have to say it again. I know this is not a popular, or it will not be a popular subject in some people's ears, because, when you start speaking about, well, you got to do this and you got to do that, some people don't want to go through all of that. And I understand. I get you. We all play a different role. We all have different things to do. But, that idea of keep your friends close and your enemies even closer, I used to always have an issue with that statement. Always, ever since I was young. It took me into my adulthood to actually understand that statement. Believe it or not, as simple as it is, as common as you hear. For some of us, we're slow learners on certain things. And I used to always be like, man, my enemy's close. I'm stabbing him. Like, no, don't get close to me. But and I couldn't understand it. So whenever my enemy was close, I'm popping off. Until I really understood that if you get the deeper aspect about it, when you're directly engaging, it's like the Incredible Hulk. Any of you who watch that, the more you fight him, the stronger he gets, like the Juggernaut. The more you fight him, the stronger he gets. So you start to learn how to use that Damballa energy. That direct engagement is not always the way to go, because if you keep them close, sometimes what I'll even do when I see an enemy, I'll play this game. I'll compliment them, right? Because a lot of times if your enemy is a predator, again, predator is the prelude to predatorial mindset, is self-absorption. They live within their own bubble. Only their concerns and needs are important, which is really, if you learn anything about the era of the caveman, that's how the cavemen lived. The only time that they cared was when they felt some level of pain. But anything and anyone else can get it, can feel pain, can be hurt. But the only time they were concerned was when they felt some measure of discomfort. Look at the crack and AIDS epidemic. When did it become an epidemic? Okay, it's just you gotta pay attention. The pictures are moving by very quickly, So it's like you gotta keep your hands and feet in the car. It's moving by real quickly. So you start to understand there's still an Iceman. There's an Iceman mentality still very much alive inside of the predator, But so you start to understand that, I may compliment an enemy. I may compliment a vulture, because what am I doing in that situation? I'm deluding the vulture into thinking that I'm not what they thought I was. I actually have really good taste. Because see, if I'm completely self-absorbed and I'm the best this and I'm the best that and I'm this that, and someone says, hey, you the best this and you the best that, right? Now I'm completely disarmed and I'm saying, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell everybody else too. Exactly. You see, you find that people do that a lot in relationships. People who have a predatorial mindset, who have a scavenger mindset, they do that a lot. They use flattery, because flattery is a form of manipulation. They use compliments and flattery to manipulate people into a certain position, because that person is so self-absorbed that they don't even realize that, okay, well, this person who I thought may have been a problem, may have been an enemy, has just as good a taste as I do. So they're cool. I'd like to have them around. They're good to be around. And see, that allows you to really, to not really let them know what you're doing. So you don't even want them to know that, nah, I don't trust you. I don't rock with you. I don't this, that, and that. Now, again, this is one way of working, one way of thinking. It may not work for everyone. It really depends upon your disposition and if what you're politicking for is worth it. See, there's been times on this show that people have come on here and said things that I completely disagree with. And I've kept my mouth shut, tacit silence, and you listeners took it as approval of what the person was saying. But I have to put it on the scales and balance it. Is it worth me showing that I disagree with what's being said right now, or is it better that we move forward into a bigger and larger goal? We come back and deal with this a little bit later. So you have to fly even above the vulture. You got to fly even higher. And even see like, there's something else going on here. Now I'm gonna go to one of the pieces that were put in the chat room. Brother Byron says, Chief, does moving amongst vultures require us to utilize more energy? Absolutely not. See, that's the thing. We end up using more energy when we're always trying to directly engage without learning how to be slippery, like a serpent. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. We use a lot less energy. And he says, and if so, what methods can apply to conserve energy in such circumstances? Well, basically everything that I've been talking about, this is how we conserve our energy. Because for some of us, we're not going to be able to get out of that room as quickly as we would like to. We got to be honest about it. We're just not going to be able to get out of that room. So we're going to have to learn how to move amongst them and not become them. See, that's the key. You don't have to become a vulture to defeat a vulture. You need knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to defeat a vulture. How do we know that? Well, who's the only one who can speak to the Aj? Who can speak to the Iyami, to the Aj Oshironga? Orunmila. He has a pact. He has an agreement with the Aj, Orunmila, representing what? Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Break down, take it beyond the names and break it down to the actual formula. See, that's important. You see, break it down to the actual formula, and just, so Once you start to understand that, it teaches you, okay, well, I know that energy, I know this energy, I know what this one represents, I know what that one represents. So now I can get a better understanding of how to move around them. Go to another one. Greetings all. So should I speak to these vultures at work even though I'm treated like the help? Absolutely. See, that's personal. Even though I'm treated like the help. We don't know if you're treated like the help, Angel. A20108. A2010 Angel said that. See, that's another one. That's an example of you're sharing the chronicle filtered by your own perspective. So we already know that what you're saying is not the truth, because you would have presented it differently than that. Now you might say, no, I'm telling the truth, but you done lost me already. So when you say, so should I speak to these vultures at work even though I'm treated like the help? So if you really are asking for guidance, and I'm not getting on you, I'm just saying I'm giving you advice as to how to get insight from someone you may ask and what shuts people down. So that question right there would shut someone who really has guidance down. As soon as you say, even though I'm treated like the help, because technically you are the help, right? So you would have to say, I would advise you to say, greetings all. So should I speak to these vultures at work, even though sometimes I feel like I'm treated like, help or a servant? See the difference? It's subtle. I know it's subtle, but that's how you keep those who would actually be jegnas to you and guides to you. You keep them from shutting down on the information from you. Of course, Sequoia says, and the reason I say of course, she says, how do we find balance between speaking from our emotional perceptions and speaking from a place of truth? The reason I say it, of course, because I notice one thing with you, Sequoia. A lot of your questions always come in the form of how do we find balance? Pay attention to that, Sequoia. You should. You normally are asking for some type of balance between this one or that one. And that's a good thing. That's why I want you to pay attention to it. That's a good thing. You're trying to find the balance between the two. And what we'll do, I'll answer that in tomorrow's segment. Okay? I know we have some questions here that are in the room, but we're coming to the end of our serpent. So I'll get into more of this tomorrow. We're going to continue some of this. We got a new discussion we're going to talk about tomorrow, but I'll start off by answering your questions that you put in the comments, and I'll keep the questions that you have here in the chat room currently. All right, so that has been our community segment, and we'll finish up with some more information on this tomorrow, because I have a lot more that I wanted to share, but I don't want to go over today. Here she comes.
90 seconds.
Oh, she said, come on, Daddy. Come on back to bed, Daddy. All right, so my lady's here. So let me keep it moving. All right, and tomorrow, what's tomorrow? Wednesday, 9 p.m. late night segment. Y'all know how the late night segments get. So bring your popcorn. No, I'm joking. I ain't here to entertain y'all. All right, but we'll be back tomorrow night. She's gonna give me my 60-second warning, and then we're out. All right. So this has been seconds. So this has been community. If you're not a member of our new spiritual training, sign up. And just a little heads up, and I'll give another heads up tomorrow. Changes are going on the site, as many of you have noticed. So you may see some things pop up, some things disappear, some things come back. We're currently in development, but I didn't want to take down the entire site to do that. All right. So I'll see you all tomorrow evening, 9 p.m. Until such time, be safe.